Hello, everyone. Welcome to a special Saturday edition of Talking Cinema. I'm your host, Julius Freeman. We didn't do the show last night because of obviously, we had some things to do, and so my co-host Sean and I could not do the show because of other things that we had to take care of. But tonight we're doing the special edition, and we have a third guest. Hello, Sean. How you doing?
Hey, Julius. What's up, buddy?
Nothing much, man. How's your Saturday been going?
It's good, man. I bought a Christmas tree today, so I'm an official.
Nice.
I feel like I'm officially an adult now. I own my own Christmas tree.
Very nice, very nice. So, would you like to introduce our next guest, or would you like me to do it? Our special co-host, I should say.
Our special co-host for this episode is a man near and dear to our hearts, a man who knows more about cinema in his little finger than I might know in my whole body, and I went to film school, so this guy puts us all to shame.
Yeah,
he is super knowledgeable, super nice guy. Our good friend, James.
Hello, James. Hell of an intro. Probably gonna let you guys down.
No, you're not gonna let us down. Don't sell yourself short, James. We all know that you are knowledgeable. You're a walking encyclopedia when it comes to cinema, and so you're a special addition to the cake that is Sean and Julius Freeman. You're like a pumpkin spice, as they say, the extra nice, sweetness to it. So
fantastic.
Tonight's episode, we're gonna talk about Hail Caesar, directed, written, and produced, if I'm correct, if I'm not mistaken, by the Coen Brothers. Am I right? The Coen Brothers? Produced as well? James, do you know?
Probably, yeah. I think they're both credited as directors on it, but I think it's like Ethan's more the producer, Joel's more the director.
I see. Okay. So, yes, guys, we are going to talk about... Whoops. Why didn't this work? There we go. Hail Caesar. There it is. Would you like to show... should we show the trailer? Should we just show the trailer? I think we're okay with that, right? I think there'll be no copyright strikes if I just show the trailer, right?
I think you're good to show the trailer.
Okay, let's do that. Let's show the trailer.
Oh, Julius?
Yes?
Just letting you know, when you did your intro, we couldn't hear it, the music. So,
man, what the heck? We may have
an issue hearing the trailer.
Okay, that's weird. I don't know why it's not. See, the volume's all the way up here.
Okay.
I have the volume up here on my end, so I don't know what the heck's going on. Okay, you know what? Let's just... Well,
we could always play it and then talk over it.
What about now? Can you hear it?
No.
What about now?
Yeah.
I think that's what it is. That was my earphones. By the way, Apple TV does not advertise for this show. Just FYI.
Yet.
Clooney getting slapped is one of the best things about the movie.
Okay. There's that. Well, let me just get out of that. So, Hail Caesar. Released in, I think it was 2000. When was it? 2016 when it was released?
Yeah.
2016. Starring George Clooney. What was your first impression of the film when you first saw it? Because I know the both of us, for those of you who are watching, please comment. If you have any questions or anything that you would like to share, please comment so that we could, answer your questions. But for those of you who don't know, myself, Sean, and James are huge Coen Brothers fans. We are essentially nerds for their films because of the way they approach cinema and the way they tell stories and not only the way they tell stories, but the content that they choose to I guess essentially produce and showcase to the world. So that's why they're revered in our circle. So we are huge Coen Brothers fans, and if you guys are also fans of the Coen Brothers, like I said, join in on the conversation, comment, and don't forget to hit the like button as well on the channel. The more the more likes we get, the better chances that YouTube algorithm will give us a chance to get out there and spread the word for talking cinema, and not just talking cinema with Julius Freeman, but also Julius Freeman and Sean Malone, excuse me, but also for the Julius Freeman Talking Comics channel. So, first impressions of Hail Caesar. Let's start with James, our special guest host for the night. Let's start with you, James. What was your first impression when you first watched Hail Caesar?
Well, I saw it opening night because I'm a big Coen Brothers dork, and I couldn't wait to see it. And I remember Sean bringing this up last week, that the film was like unexpectedly dropped in the very beginning of the year that it came out, which usually means the studio didn't have a lot of confidence in it. And so, yeah, it was kind of like dumped unceremoniously into like the beginning of the year, and which I went into it thinking it was going to be like Lester Coen Brothers, and I walked out thinking it was like maybe not one of my favorite of theirs, but I did like it a lot, and I felt like, you know, it was immediately a underrated film, and that people who missed it were gonna, you know, regret not seeing it, and the people that were underrating it would figure that out probably years later.
Sean, first
Yeah, I
impressions?
feel the same way. Like, I actually walked out of the movie pretty convinced that it was my favorite film of theirs that I had seen up to that point. I love, I love all the Coen Brothers films, but they sort of have a couple of different flavors in their films. They sort of have, all their films are funny and quirky, but they sort of have like the films more in the vein of like Fargo or No Country for Old Men, where you kind of have just a lot of like nihilistic, like, you know, murderous kind of dark stuff going on. And then they have this brand of film that's more like Raising Arizona or Hudsucker Proxy or Hail Caesar, or Julius, you brought it up the other day, Burn After Reading, which are more just like completely ridiculous, farcical. There's often still a crime element involved, I guess, in Burn After Reading. Maybe that would be a good hybrid example. But anyway, so the films of theirs that really appealed to me the most are on the more like farce, just ridiculous comedy side. And this movie delivers like completely in that arena. I got to see the movie when it came out at like a film, this thing called Film Independent. It was like, so basically like industry people. Like I got to see the movie with a bunch of people from the film industry. So like, it was just funny because like obviously the movie is a huge satire of Hollywood and Hollywood history, and that crowd just like, you couldn't hear the dialogue of the movie because that crowd was laughing so hard at certain scenes because they were all in on the joke. But yeah, there's a lot to say about the movie. Like, and I think this is something we can talk about tonight, but like I've seen the movie 6-7 times now, and I still like, even though I can see certain aspects of the movie that are like, oh, I kind of see like maybe some metaphors that they're making here, or like, you know, maybe they're trying to say this, maybe they're trying to say that. But overall, I still leave the movie just going like, I don't know what these guys, like what high level these guys are thinking at, what they really mean by this movie. I don't know what it means. I just know it's extremely entertaining, and it gets you thinking in a really deep level, and at the same time gets you like laughing at like the most shallow level possible. So it's a total, like, Coen Brothers are really complex filmmakers, and this movie is complex but also ridiculous and stupid at the same time.
like most of their movies, right? I would say most of the movies are like that, except obviously with the exceptions of like the more serious films, like I mentioned before the stream, Miller's Crossing, which is the more serious of their films, and of course Blood Simple. But for the most part, I think the Coen Brothers are more famous for having that dark humor and, you know, showcasing their talent for dark humor in their films and being able to almost like master satire writers, you know, satirical writers. Just having like it's almost in the edge of cynicism, but they're not cynical. They still can point and laugh at something. Like, for instance, here, I'll show you. I'm gonna try it out. I'm gonna do it. Like, for instance, this little quick scene here. You know what scene this is, Sean?
Oh, this is a great scene for so many reasons.
I'm not gonna play the entire scene, but I'm gonna play this line because this line had me in stitches. I had to pause the movie because it was just so ridiculously well done. Here we go. Here we go. Oh, hold on, I gotta unplug that way you guys can hear it. Put this up a little bit. I just loved it because of he's asking him, do we depict the character of Christ fairly? And the first thing this guy says is like, the chariot seems fake. It's too fakey for me. How does he jump from one chariot to the other? Which is something that a lot of cinephiles would do when it comes to like, oh, I didn't really like that because it wasn't too realistic, you know, because that's impossible. How could this guy jump from one movie car to another? It just doesn't make any sense. But here they add that to this scene here. But the whole scene here is a fantastic comedy riot. You know, this when he's there, the rabbi, the priest, who was it? The pastor, and who was the other person? I forgot the other person.
There's a Eastern Orthodox priest. There's a Catholic priest. There's a Protestant padre, as Eddie Mannix, and a rabbi. And it's funny, like, you know, it's also funny to me in that scene how each of those types of people are depicted, you know?
Yeah.
And how they're kind of like, well, I don't know. There's a lot to say about that. Like, some of the strongest metaphors I see in the movie are this like idea of like picture making and like how it's put up on this pedestal, and it's like this thing that like what's his name, Baird Whitlock says, oh, we fool ourselves into thinking there's some kind of spiritual dimension to picture making when he's talking to Eddie before Eddie starts slapping him around. And you see Eddie, like, Eddie's obviously like a really devout religious man, and he has this like really guilty conscience about like sneaking cigarettes and stuff. But then at the same time, he's like running the studio in a really like kind of ruthless, you know, I mean, yeah, sometimes compassionate, but definitely not moralistic way, right? He's lying.
No,
he's paying bribes. He's telling lies left and right. And then the thing he confesses to the priest about is like, I snuck a cigarette and I lied to my wife about it. But you also see in Eddie, like, I think a really like, it's interesting. Like, I heard Josh Brolin interviewed about the role, and he said he approached it like really earnestly. Like, he saw in Eddie like someone, like a decent man who was trying to like do his best. And even though the movie is very satirical and you could read a lot of cynicism into it, like Brolin didn't approach his part like that. He approached it like very earnestly, you know. And I think that's why his performance comes off so well too, is because he's so earnest and just plays him in such a human way. But anyway, those parallels between like, you know, even like and spoilies, everybody. If you haven't watched the movie, then why are you watching this? Go watch the movie. You know, like Eddie Mannix obviously finds some kind of spiritual fulfillment in his job. He ends up turning down the job at Lockheed because he, you know, his priest says, hey, if you find something that feels right to you and God wants you to do what's right. And the movie ends and he's kind of like still in his element. Hey, go do, telling his secretary, do this, do that. Camera tilts up. You got the, you know, the heavenly light and the heavenly voices. And I don't know, it's like, to me, it's like there's two ways you can take that. One is like that really earnest, like, yeah, like movies are very like spiritual and moving, and people do put them, like, kind of look up to them or whatever. But on the other hand, you can see like the Coens like making fun of that idea, like of putting this thing that's so that's sort of made, you see how the sausage is made in the movie, and then put that up on a pedestal and be like, this is the most important thing in the world, is obviously ridiculous, so yeah, I don't know. Do you guys have any thoughts on that? James, I want to hear.
I definitely think that I noticed this the first time I saw it, and it pops up in a lot of their movies. It's just like the portrayal of religion and religious motifs, and it's very prominent in A Serious Man, which
oh yeah, that movie was great.
Which is also a film about a character going through a crisis of faith from like the perspective of the Jewish experience, and this is Catholic experience, I suppose. But yeah, it is really interesting that there's this connection between the film that they're making, which is the portrayal of Christ from the perspective of the Romans, and how it just kind of weaves into the life of Eddie Mannix, who I think, according to the Coen brothers, is like a kind of patron saint of the movies. And that's, I think, ends up at the end, is he's a martyr to the movies. He can get a better job, making more money, less hours. He can be there for, the things that are important in his life, but he chooses to do the thing that's harder. And he sacrifices himself at the altar of the movies.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you're right. I took that. I had a different perspective on it. I kind of saw it as, the movie's called Hail Caesar, and of course the Coen brothers are always multi-layered when it comes to their storytelling. So I kind of saw it as like, he is the Caesar of the studio, and the higher power is the New York guy who calls him up and says, "Hey, I want you to replace this." "Oh, but this guy is not really he's a dust actor, right?" And you don't hear what the other guy, the higher power, quote unquote, symbolically speaking, pretty much shuts him down. And he just says, "Okay, so that's a great idea." So he just follows what the higher power, right, tells him to do, which is put this dust actor in this movie. I don't care if he's, can't say the line or can't speak. He does it anyway. So I kind of saw that he was the Caesar of the film. He was the general that made sure everything ran smoothly. And of course, you have the other parts of the movie with the George Clooney and the communist and what have you, which was that's another factor we could talk about. But I upon watching this movie again, I couldn't help, maybe it's just me, but I couldn't help but notice that Eddie Mannix was like the White Rabbit in Alice in Wonderland, always looking at his clock. He was always running and running and running. And I feel like he was entering rabbit holes of this underbelly, which, in the beginning of the movie, he gets that actress she was butter. What was that scene, by the way? Oh. What was that implication? What was that implying?
That scene, that is like your typical like Tuesday night in Hollywood back in the 50s. That kind of stuff was going on all over the place.
And I love that scene because it's like, it speaks, I think a lot of the movie speaks to, if not a more innocent time, the idea of a more innocent time, where he's like going to this guy's house at 5 a.m. to like break up this, salacious photo shoot, which is just her in like a Fraulein costume, like churning butter, like, it has like an innocence to it that heightens the ridiculousness of, again, Coen Brothers ridiculousness. Like, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I have to ask you guys right off the bat. Do you guys know that Eddie Mannix is a real person, or he was a real person?
What? No, he wasn't.
Yes, he was. I can't remember exactly which studio he worked for. I want to say it might have been MGM. Maybe it was Paramount, but he was one of the fixers, famous fixers who, he kept that engine running. And there was a real Nick Skank that would
well, I'll be damned.
Warner Brothers. I can't remember. I should have done some research, but
here it is. Here it is. Wow. He was a fixer, a person paid to disguise details of the stars' often colorful private lives to maintain their public image.
Okay.
Among his most lasting contributions to Hollywood was a ledger. He maintained that lists the cost and revenues of every MGM film produced between 1924 and 1962. Wow.
Okay.
That's amazing. I had no idea. This person was a real thing. A real person, I should say.
When he walks into the general counsel's office, the studio lawyer's office, and he's like, is there a possibility we could have her adopt her own child?
He was like,
it's one of my favorite lines in the movies. After they have the conversation and they're like, oh yeah, we could get Joe Silverman and blah, blah, blah. And then the lawyer goes, this is interesting.
Like the Coen Brothers are obsessed with lawyers. They pop up in so many of their movies, and they're always portrayed as people that just are like fascinated by just the just the very minute details of their industry. It's very weird, but it pops up a lot in their work.
This is interesting.
Yeah,
that is interesting. That is very interesting. Wow, that's a nice tidbit of trivia there, James. Thank you for that. I had no idea that Eddie Mannix was a real person. Amazing.
Yeah, I think
Sean,
the film was made up, but yeah, just based on the person.
No, I was just gonna say something else about that line, because like with the Coens, it's all about subtext. You know,
Yeah.
It's like you were saying about the guy saying, "Oh, the chariot race was fakey." Like, there's a lot of subtext there, and like it speaks to somehow, like that line spoke to how you feel as a movie fan, or those kind of conversations you've been in. But when that guy says, "This is interesting," like I just read so much into that. Like, this is why I get out of bed in the morning. This is why I work at this studio. Like, this is like it's his life's purpose, you know, to find fascination with these ridiculous scenarios.
It's I love the scene with the panel of the religious figures, because the way that I interpret it with the chariot being fakey, and what I love about that exchange is that Eddie's response to it, Brolin's performance is incredible in that scene all throughout the movie, but you can tell he's like, that's actually not what I'm asking about. Yeah. And I love how like I think that like the subtext of that scene is that even though he's gone to these people for their religious advice and the religious take, like everyone suddenly becomes a film critic. Everyone's got opinions about the script, and they're trying to give him notes. And it's like these people they're there for one specific reason, which is just to basically give the film literally their blessing. And they're there to give him script notes, and it's hilarious.
Absolutely. You're absolutely right about that.
Can you talk about the homages to different genres of filmmaking? Like you have Hobie's cowboy movie.
Yeah.
When he swings on the branch and shoots the dude upside down. You've got Scarlett Johansson's Bubsy Berkeley type aquatic musical. You've got the swinging dinghy dance and something sequence.
Incredible.
That real quick, that line, like you talk about subtext, when they're doing in the middle, when they're doing their little dance number, and then the other group of sailors come in and they catch him like in the middle of like, it looks like, homoerotica, and the line when they say, "This place looks open," that line really like just I was like, wow. Like you said, you talk about subtext. You talk about subtext. That's subtext for you right there.
And the way they stage it with Channing Tatum turning around with, but it's funny because they're like, if that wasn't enough, they're gonna have Channing Tatum walk towards the camera and then get like bumped by two guys in the middle, and it's
I know,
so great. It's incredible.
Yeah, I was gonna say that there was even more innuendo in that scene that I didn't pick up on the first 6 times.
Oh yeah,
a lot of innuendo. But speaking of the cowboy scene, here's a little clip of that I'm going to show.
Oh, I love this. He's so good in this movie. and our friend Roger Deakins makes it all look so amazing.
This is great.
Right here. So that's his accentuated turn there, and his accentuated turn into his close-up is very similar to the close-up we get when Mannix is reviewing dailies of Hail Caesar, and you hear the director saying, "Squint at the heavenly presence," and you know Clooney comes in. It comes into Clooney's close-up, and he's like, you know, like
he's like trying a bunch of different ones. Yeah,
I love those touches or those tributes to old movie making and the old stylistic tropes of old movie making. And I'll say this too, like another thing to discuss or just mention is I don't, you know, if you're familiar with those kind of films like King of Kings or Ben-Hur,
right.
or those kind of like, they call them like, what do they call them? Sword
and sandal picture.
Yeah, sword and sandal, but especially of the biblical variety or of the religious variety. There's so much rich humor in those Hail Caesar scenes, like just direct parallels to Ben-Hur in particular.
Yeah.
You know, get out of the way, Romans first, and then he sees Christ, and you know that's straight out of Ben-Hur, and just the acting, the stylistic choices there are very, very. It could be straight out of that era, you know.
It's almost like wandering into an amusement park, especially with all of the different vignettes, the different genres. You kind of just you drop in right as they're happening. You're not giving any context at all. And then a few minutes in, they'll like break down, and you know something will happen that will reveal, oh, this is the type of movie that you're watching, and this is how it's connected to the overarching story. But yeah, it's one of the things that makes it so rewatchable is that you're like getting to experience an amusement park of old Hollywood.
That's what's so fun about this movie is as Eddie Mannix navigates his way through the studio and through his workday, you get to see, you know, this sandal picture and then this musical and then this aquatic musical and, you know, like, and the Western, like, it's so fun. It's just a fun movie. That's another thing about it. It's just so much fun.
Extremely fun.
Now that is true, but let's look at the underbelly that's in this film as well, which is my forte. The beast of the belly of underneath the glamour that was and still is in a lot of ways Hollywood. You have the scandal of the Eagles, the wings and the Eagles that they keep mentioning.
I have that written down. It's
On Wings as Eagles.
On Wings as Eagles, yeah.
On Wings as Eagles, which is obviously a take on like the very controversial things that studios do hide from, you know, famous actors. One famous actor that I could think of off the top of my head is Rock Hudson. Now, Rock Hudson was this beefy, you know, ladies' man. You know, he was the ladies' man of the films, but he had, you know, gay parties at his mansion. He was famous. He was infamous, I guess, within the industry about that. And that's what that's another thing I love about Hail Caesar is that they have, like you mentioned, Sean, the fun of old Hollywood. You know, this spectacle, this Tinseltown. You know, the land of dreams. And then at the same time, they show you a glimpse of the underbelly. You know, the communist meeting, the rumors, and the studio putting two stars together to make it seem like they're dating. You know, that kind of stuff. And then also, what was the other one? The fake adoption so that way they could protect the Scarlett Johansson's image. And on top of that, what I also love about Scarlett Johansson's character was that they introduced her in this beautiful, well shot number. You know, that was a homage to all the musicals, and she's blonde, beautiful, and you know, very looks old Hollywood. And then the moment she opens her mouth, it's like she is not what she seems. Just like, you know, like Hollywood. Hollywood is not what it seems on the surface of things.
Yeah,
and that's why I'm a huge fan of the Coen Brothers, because they're able to do that. They're able to show you both the beautiful and the serene, and at the same time the ugly side of it. And let's talk about the communist scene. Let's do it, Sean.
My favorite, man. My favorite part. And then the light bulb, he pops it out here. That guy deserves an Oscar just for that one little
cameo. He should have, right?
One-shot performances, he would absolutely win that one.
Yeah. The Oscar for one-shot performances.
Let's talk about not the subtext, but the B story in this movie, which is this part of the movie, the communist scene, and they essentially take the star of the movie, of this fictitious movie called Hail Caesar, and they school him into the know-hows of Das Kapital, which is the book written by Karl Marx. Now, which is also an interesting factor. And back in the 50s, there was a huge communist movement in Hollywood. Lucille Ball was one of the most famous actresses that was part of the Communist Party, part of the Communist Party when she was at her peak. And so, what's your take on this factor here that people don't really know about Hollywood's history, which is it had a strong communist base amongst the writers, amongst the blue collar type of workers. What do you think about this element in the movie and also historically? Let's start with you, James, since you're the cinematic expert here. What was your take on this sub story that we got from Hail Caesar?
Well, I actually have a lot of thoughts on it. It's kind of a running theme in all of their movies. It's funny you say B plot is the bear being kidnapped. I specifically remember they sold this movie as it's like this caper about a missing actor. Like that's how they kind of marketed it. And I remember when I saw the film, I was like, oh, this is so great that like they've just completely undercut like what seemed like the A plot of this film as just kind of like it meandered and then went nowhere. Like all of their films do. Like It's always driven by somebody who's trying to get some money, get back some money, take some money, steal it, whatever. But money is always a driving force in all of their films. I think it's every single one has that like recurring, plot device. And so it's interesting in this film that you have like, first and foremost, it's called Capitol Pictures. Yeah. And it has a like, it's weird because I get the impression that the Coen Brothers are probably not very pro-capitalist, but probably enjoy being successful filmmakers. Like, I think they can look at both parties and see them both as being absurd. Like Capitol Pictures and the way they run things is very militant. They probably think, oh, it's crazy, anything great comes out of this machine. But then they probably look at the writers and they're like, these guys are kind of ridiculous too, They're lost cause of like, trying to raise $100,000 to send to Russia. Like the fact that it all comes down to that is so stupid and so hilarious. It's amazing. It's beautiful.
There's that one line where the narrator says the communists took a rare respite from their toil.
Yeah.
And it shows them like jigsaw puzzles,
And the last piece did not fit.
Yeah.
That final piece did not fit that puzzle.
And it's so clear from the rest of the context of their scenes that this is not a rare moment for them, that this is pretty much their life, like just sitting around, talking, theorizing, playing, doing puzzles. So yeah, there's a tongue-in-cheek aspect to that, I think. Definitely. But that's the thing. Everyone looks ridiculous in this movie. Like,
yeah,
the communists look ridiculous. Eddie Mannix looks ridiculous. It doesn't matter. So that's what's so great about the Coens is like you're always trying to pin them down and be like, well, who are they really criticizing here?
Yeah.
Or who are they, satirizing here? And it's like everybody,
Yeah.
Yeah, to an extent, except for what's his name, Hobie, the cowboy. I think he was the only likable character in the movie. He was the only character that I did not find myself, kind of hating
Him and
Or-
Carlisle,
Carlisle. Who was Carlisle again?
his date.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Like Hobie comes off really well because he's kind of innocent, but they also use him in a really winky way, like whenever he spots Channing Tatum's character.
Yeah.
And he spots the briefcase, and then you have like he's like, keys pard, I'm taking the car. And then he's like, and he's got his cowboy hat on, and he's like the all-American hero going to like bust the communists. So that's very winky, I think.
Yeah,
So
it was.
Don't you think, James?
It's so many great moments. I was just thinking of like, it's funny because there is that like third act moment where Alden Ehrenreich becomes the star of the movie. Like he kind of takes the reins, he chases down this money, he kind of solves the mystery. And it's just like he's throwing out like so many great moments. Like I love the stuff that he does with his spaghetti. That like whole routine with that is incredible. His line delivery in the movie is amazing. I love the way he says extras. Extras. I laugh every single time he says it. And then when he shows up at the mansion, that beautiful mansion that the communists live in. I love that like Hobie walks in and Baird's like, Hobie Doyle, you're a communist too?
Yeah.
So it's communist.
And I love when Clooney gets back to the studio and he's talking to Eddie Mannix, and he's like spent one afternoon as a communist, and now he's telling Eddie Mannix like, you know, all about it and how they figured out the whole scheme of history and everything, and he does it in such like such a confident, like an unearned confident way, you know.
Oh yeah, very entitled.
Yeah, and then to see Brolin slap him, and by the way, Clooney does this face where it's like this surprised kid face. Where he's like
getting slapped by a parent. Absolutely.
Yeah, like Clooney has. He's so good at that. Yeah, it's right here. But, and then he's like, I won't, Eddie. I won't forget.
Last thing you say before I have you tossed in jail for colluding in your own abduction. Eddie, I would never do that. Shut up. You're going to go out there and then you're going to finish Hail Caesar. You're going to give that speech at the feet of the penitent thief, and you're going to believe every word you say. You're going to do it because you're an actor, and that's what you do. Just like the director does what he does, and the writer and the script girl and the guy who claps the slate. You're going to do it because the picture has worth, and you have worth if you serve the picture, and you're never going to forget that again.
That's a manifesto right there.
Yeah.
Yes. This scene here, it works in so many levels because first of all, he literally slapped the communism philosophy out of him in this scene. All that hard work that those communist writers did throughout that whole scene, literally went away with just how many times he slapped him? 6 times. 1, 2, and then 1, 2, and then 1, 2. So yeah, 6 times. So it only took 6 slaps from a Caesar-like character, almost like a tyrant, and he explains to him the philosophy of the capitalist system in a way. Right. Everyone has a purpose and serves their purpose, and that's that. That's the way it's going to be, and that's the way it's always going to be, and no one's going to change that. And he goes right back to going, okay, well, all right, sir, let's go back to it. And that's essentially what typically happens when it comes to real life situations where the capitalist system has proven historically to have always overcome the obstacles when people attempt to change it, because it is what it is in a lot of ways.
But this is also true to Brolin's character arc and where his character is in that moment, because by that time he's come to that realization of like what he truly believes. Right. Yeah. Because he was shaky throughout the whole movie, right? He was kind of on 1 foot in, 1 foot out. Should I take this Lockheed Martin job or should I not take this Lockheed Martin job? I don't know what to do anymore. And then finally he really, yeah, you're right. He finally accepts his role. I am this studio exec and I do clean up jobs and I'm really good at it and I'm going to stick to it. I'm going to stick to it until I can't do it anymore. And you're right. And that scene with George Clooney, he took down the hammer and decided to just go with the 100%. When he's confessing to the priest, he says something like, there's this job and it would be like easier and it would be good money and there's nothing wrong with that job. And then there's this other job that's like really hard, but like, and really what he gets at, is it's really hard. It's the hardest job, but it feels right,
Mm-hmm.
And then that's why I said like that whole scene is a manifesto, because then by that time he's convinced of what he believes,
Well, it's the timing of that scene is interesting because the final confession comes after he slaps Clooney around. It's like that nailed it in the coffin. And the only reason I remember that is ever since the first time I saw the movie, I thought it's very funny that he highlights to the priest, I struck an actor in anger. But he didn't say anything about the actress that he slapped earlier in the film, either because he didn't remember or he's just like, well, I don't need to apologize for that. That was just an actress. But Baird Whitlock's a star, So I'm definitely going to need to repent for that,
No, you're right, James. I had that flipped in my brain. You're right. But either way, it speaks to something about him realizing his.
But it's interesting because I can't remember if it's in that scene that he breaks down. Like he has a moment where I think he has like an emotional moment, a crisis moment. And then I think he comes to that realization and he storms out and like, that's it. Like he knows that this is what he wants to do.
You mean in the confession?
Yeah. Like he says something to the priest like, oh, I'm trying my hardest or whatever. And, I don't know. Maybe I'm getting it conflated with the first scene, but
the first scene is where he says I'm trying and he kind of starts to cry. But like in that last scene, the priest says God wants us to do what's right.
Right.
And then he's like, okay, yeah, I understand. And then the priest keeps like trying to reinforce it, like and phrase it different ways. And Eddie's just like, yeah, whatever, I got it. Like,
yeah, it's the realization that he needs. He like storms out, and then you have that final moment with the secretary.
Sorry, my daughter distracted me.
Can we talk real quick about Channing Tatum's leap from the boat to the submarine?
Yes, let's talk. Let's talk about that, because that scene freaking cracked me up because he was so dramatic, overly dramatic. I'm gonna pull up the scene, but just give me a second. Go ahead.
Very
go ahead,
choreographed.
What, James?
A very choreographed leap.
Go ahead, Sean. Talk. What are your thoughts of that scene?
Oh, it's just Tatum. I mean, obviously his dance, the whole dance sequence is great, and it's fun to see him sing and dance in the prior scene. But yeah, everything's heightened in this movie. So here's Channing Tatum, who had just done this big, lavish and innuendo laden dance scene, and then for him to jump in such a flamboyant way to the submarine it's just humorous.
All right, here we go.
It's also very theatrical, and it kind of like, I think that's another reason it tickles me, because actors being actor-like even when they're not acting.
And he has a dog too, which is even better.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
I love too how like the communists are so, earlier in the movie they're talking about action. We're taking action, and it feels so good, And then the briefcase drops into the water. They easily could have just jumped in and saved it, but none of them want to get wet.
They're like, oh, yeah.
They don't want to get wet, and they just let it sink. And they're all like,
It's like at the end of the day, they're just like disgruntled employees that are just like they're griping about their jobs, and they're just, because they're writers, they overly intellectualize something that is common among, I think, anybody who's disgruntled in the workplace,
Was it I wanted to point out this movie has a lot of comedians in it and comic actors, really great comic actors. I noticed obviously Wayne Knight plays the extree who from
we were talking about this earlier.
who drugged him. And then there were a couple of guys I recognized because I watched the show Comedy Bang Bang, and they have basically just a parade of UCB people, Upright Citizens Brigade improv people. And there's several actors in the movie, like the assistant director on the set of when they drug Clooney with the drink, and they're in the set of the movie. And then there was one or two other roles where I was like, oh, those are like UCB people. So they cast it with a lot of comedians. But I brought that up because in the movie, David Krumholtz, who's the guy from Numbers, and he was in like Addams Family Values, really funny actor. And he's the one that pipes up occasionally, and he goes, "The body politic," and the other guy goes, "Shut up."
Yeah. Throughout that whole scene, whenever he opened his mouth, the other actor just always said, "Shut up!" Always shut him up.
Yeah, always
told him to shut up. But yeah, there's a lot of comic actors in this movie.
And let's not forget Jonah Hill. Small part, but very, very good. A very good scene where he's just a straight character, not straight character in terms of his orientation. I'm talking just, he does his job, and here's Scarlett Johansson coming on to him, and he's just like, it's part of the job, man.
Yeah,
like she's just part of the job. Like just
professional human, and
yeah,
he meets the qualification of personhood. Well, and even then he calls her Miss, and he says it's part of the job, Miss, and he keeps calling her Miss. And earlier she gets mad because someone calls her ma'am, so her like weird infatuation with him immediately is sort of explained, at least in part, by that. But yeah, and speaking of which, like, to be the Coen brothers, and we talked about all the great actors in the movie. Tilda Swinton is amazing in this movie.
She is.
Ralph Fiennes has a really, really funny part. But to be the Coens and just attract this level of talent in even the smallest part,
yeah,
well,
especially with Ray Fiennes, who they'd never worked with before, and he just came in to do like what I think is the best scene in the movie is the what is his name? Lawrence Lorenz. And just, like, the way that he keeps confusing the names and how ridiculous. It's such a Coen Brothers-esque name. And
Lawrence, like the words Lawrence Lorenz presents used to mean.
But no, and then like, when it just crescendos with the would but worth so simple is not only I think like one of the best gags in the movie, but pays off in one of the best gags in all Coen Brothers movies is when he goes and watches the dailies and they settle on "It's complicated." Like, amazing. It's so great.
And he delivers the line perfectly as well. Yeah. It actually worked. It worked, right?
They did in Hollywood. They figured it out back then.
Yep. So. You have no choice but to figure it out.
Yeah.
And it's great that he smiled at the camera as well after he said it. Yeah, it's complicated.
And I love when he first gets on set and he does his first take, and there's a camera like on a dolly track, and he just like looks at the camera like, like the one thing you're not supposed to do as an actor.
And that's like also it's funny because the movie takes place in the 50s, and like that is the only movie that is specifically black and white. It's like Lawrence Lorenz is like their most pretentious director that they have on their lot, and he's also the one that's tangled in the Baird Whitlock controversy. And I love how like he's the one that directed On Wings
that's right
on Wings with Angels or whatever it is, and
yeah. Wings as Eagles.
Yeah. Right.
Oh gosh. Oh, Frances McDormand and the editing suite.
Oh my God, that scene, man.
Do you have that clip, Julio?
Let me look it up. Let me look that up. Yeah, I love that she was choking almost near to death. She's reverse, and then he pushes the reverse button, and once she let go, she's like, I shouldn't wear scarves. She take a big swig of her cigarette, which is I thought that was the best, like the most hilarious part of the movie. Let me see if I can find that.
Cellulose is also supposed to be really flammable too. So
when he hits reverse and she goes,
All right, here we go. Here we go.
Headphones.
Yeah, it's off. They're off. That always kills me, man. I shouldn't wear scarves. Woo! Subtleties. Subtleties are always important in comedy, and the Coen Brothers just are masters of that. And I don't think not many directors these days can master subtlety like the Coen Brothers can when it comes to their comedy.
I don't know if there's anyone that or any director out there that has their instincts for comedic timing, and to not just have it layered into their dialogue. Their dialogue is like pretty much second to none in like modern writers. But on top of that, they're such precise filmmakers. They're so great with where to put their actors within the frame of the camera, how to shoot something, how to edit to get the optimum effect for every gag, every sight gag, every line of dialogue. And it's like evident in every one of their movies. Even like No Country for Old Men has some funny moments in it because they're just so good at picking up like these subtle moments and making them really funny and making them work really well.
Yeah, I had a similar thought with when the photographer takes the picture of him and he pops the bulb out. Like the editing in that scene is just virtuosic. James, you know a lot about the Coen Brothers, or you're very familiar with their other movies. So, like, what would you say are the closest parallels in their body of work to Hail Caesar? Like, what would you put in a similar category from their films?
Okay, so one of the things I think is interesting about their filmography is that it's varied. Like they're definitely auteurs. I think each of their film it shows all of the markings of a Coen Brother film, and there's something visually and like tonally reoccurring through all of their work. But you can definitely like subcategorize them into other different categories. And if I were ever like programming a festival of some of their films, I would put Hail Caesar into their George Clooney work because they all have the same wacky screwball tone. And if you go with O Brother, Where Art Thou, Intolerable Cruelty, Burn After Reading, and this film Hail Caesar, like those four movies are among their most funny. They're four of my favorite Clooney performances. I prefer him so much more as a comedic actor. And they just bring out the best in him in their work by letting him be like just an idiot. He's like so great at playing an idiot. It's amazing. Perfect across four films. So yeah,
I would personally put Burn After Reading side by side with Hail Caesar because Burn After Reading has the same kind of tone to it. The only difference being that in Hail Caesar, Eddie Mannix is not a buffoon. He's actually competent. He just has a spiritual and the moral thing that he's going through. But in Burn After Reading, every single character is an idiot in that film, man. Even the CIA agent, the ex-CIA agent played by John Malkovich is an idiot. His wife's an idiot. George Clooney's an idiot. Brad Pitt is an idiot. Even Frances McDormand's character is an idiot. Everyone in that movie is an idiot, and I just love the fact that everything is just everything falls apart for everyone in that film. But it you don't feel bad for them. You just have to laugh. Like you just laugh at these characters. And that scene where George Clooney shoots Brad Pitt in the face, and he sticks his head out of the closet, and he has this little goofy face, and George Clooney shoots him in the face. Have you seen that movie? You've seen that movie, Sean, right?
Oh yeah.
Burn After Reading. And also the title of the movie, Burn After Reading, was just a beautiful joke. You find out, spoilers everyone if you haven't seen it, is just a disc. It's just some guy's disc of his financial records. And the whole time you think Brad Pitt's character and Frances McDormand have like these secret CIA documents, when in reality they're not. It's just someone's personal financial records, and that's what made the movie. For me, that's what made the movie like I like one of the Coen Brothers top 5 in my list in terms of comedy. Anyway, not of all time, but comedy.
I think I couldn't intellectually tell you right now why I agree with you, but I agree with you in terms of the tone of the movie being very similar. You said everyone's an idiot in that movie, but I'd say maybe J.K. Simmons is the one exception who,
that's right.
Who has the great scene at the end where he's just like, well, what happened to this guy? You're like, well, he was killed. And you're like, well, good. What happened to this guy? Well, you won't be hearing from him anymore. We paid him off. Well, good. Like he's just like tying up all the loose ends.
Yeah, and then like, and then they have this. She wants us to pay for her plastic surgery. It's like, oh, done, done.
And again, that's an example of the Coen Brothers, like, kind of undercutting the driving like plot thread of their movie. Like the whole thing was about her getting money for her cosmetic surgery, and then at the very end, it's just like, oh yeah, whatever, pay that, and then let's move on.
Right.
I love that. That's fantastic. Yeah. And then I just love how he comes like, oh man, what a clusterfuck. What happened here? It's like, well, who knows?
Exactly.
I don't know. Like, it's like I want to bring up Buster Scruggs right now, but I don't know if I should because it might be too complicated of a conversation.
Do it, Sean. Do it. We all love that film. We're all fans of it. Go ahead, bring it up. What is it they want to talk about with the Buster Scruggs?
I kind of just want to hear you guys' thoughts about Buster Scruggs. And
I loved it, man. It was one of those films where you don't get many of those types of films where you have shorts amongst a long film, right? And I love that they were able to do that. I love that Netflix gave them carte blanche to do whatever they wanted with this film. And I'm happy that I wasn't happy that I didn't get to see it in the theaters, because I would have loved to have seen the Gold Rush scene in the theaters, because it was just a beautiful setting, that with that one short story. But overall, I just love the whole, like almost like a metaphysical element of the film that I really was drawn to, especially that first scene with the Buster Scruggs. Him singing "Cool Water" and going to that bar and singing and dancing. It was just, I was like, you know what, I'm in. I don't know what I'm watching. I don't care. I'm all in. Let's go. And it was a great film. The Liam Neeson story was fantastic, although it was very very dark and very heavy. But
when Buster like gets killed and then his ghost like flies up into heaven, like I was just like, that was the point where I was like, I'm in. Like,
yeah,
it was so delightful.
It was.
James, what were you going to say? You said you had some thoughts.
Well, really quickly, a thought on the ghost flying and like singing his way up to heaven was the moment I realized why they made the film for Netflix, because they probably showed it to every studio and they were like, we're not letting you make this movie. I'm sorry. It's different stories and this shit happens this early in the movie. No, my thoughts on that movie are, I don't know, like my understanding about Hail Caesar was that film was something they had been trying to make in one way or another for, I think, 10 or 20 years. And I think by the time they got to Hail Caesar, if you look at their filmography, they started to become less and less prolific. They were making movies like once every 1 to 2 years for a good period of time. And then after True Grit, they started to slow down. And I think once they did Inside Llewyn Davis, they were kind of like maybe cleaning out their desk of scripts, and they got to Hail Caesar. They did a polish on that. And then I feel like Buster Scruggs is like, hey, we always wanted to make a Western. We had all these different ideas, and they're all tied together by the theme of death. And death is a big part in every one of those vignettes.
Yeah.
And you look at Hail Caesar, which is kind of its own series of vignettes that are united by one character. And then you have The Ballad of Buster Scruggs, which are a series of vignettes united by a genre, and they're all dealing with death. And the weirdest thing about their filmography now is that their next movie doesn't involve Ethan Coen at all. He's sitting it out for the first time. It's a fully Joel Coen film, and it's an adaptation of Shakespeare's Macbeth. And I don't really know anything about the film except that it stars Denzel Washington and Frances McDermott as Lady Macbeth. But yeah, it's very strange. I'm wondering if like Ethan Coen like was just like, hey, I've kind of had enough of Hollywood. Like maybe, Hail Caesar was like his celebration and kiss off to, an industry. That's, another thing that I think is so interesting about Eddie Mannix's personal turmoil and conflict that he's going through in the movie is, are movies worthwhile? Should I dedicate my life to this? Like the guy at Lockheed is just like, when this circus is going to end at some point, like, come make airplanes, come, do something that matters to society. Why like spend your money, like building, monuments to, this, to this,
Make-believe.
Yeah. To make believe. Exactly. That's just going to be torn down. That isn't going to matter. And, I think he comes to that realization at the end that movies are worth it. I feel good about dedicating my life to this. And I wonder if there's parallels to the filmmakers in that regard.
Oh, I don't know for sure, but earthquake. Did you guys feel that? I don't know for sure, but I read into that for sure in their authorship of that character. I'm reading into like their values and things that they've thought about,
Yeah, it's the whole the job of Eddie Mannix, which I love the very big literary like narration of Michael Gambon in the film. It's very similar to kind of like the pretentious omnipresent narration of classic films from the time, and he's telling his story in this like grandiose way and finding like religious ways to like tie the two together. Like I love the thing that he says at the end that I wrote down: the stories begin and the stories end, so it has always been, but the story of Eddie Mannix will never end, for it is a tale written in light everlasting. And the camera pans up and you see a water tower that says behold. And it's like I feel like the Coen brothers are absolutely like making a gag of this and like they think it's all very funny, but they are also being sincere. I think that they see like it's I don't know, maybe it's a religion to them in some regard.
Well, yeah, because you could see when you can see the quality in the movie, that the artists put their heart and soul into them. And Coen Brothers, with the exception of a few movies like Intolerable Cruelty comes to mind, and also The Lady Killers comes to mind, where they didn't really have their heart put into it. But when it comes to like, I guess, topics or stories where they feel really strong about, you can see the heart and the soul that they put into making those films. And those in the earlier films too, Fargo, Raised in Arizona, Hudsucker Proxy. Those films, I remember Hudsucker Proxy as a kid. I was one of my favorite movies as a kid, believe it or not. And it was due to the fact that they have this like gift to pull you into their crazy world. I remember what hooked me into a Hudsucker Proxy was the scene where Paul Newman is about to fall off to the building and Tim Robbins saves him, and his pants are ripping. And then like it cuts to Paul Newman's tailor. He's like, I want this single stitch. Damn it, I don't want a double stitch. And he's like, oh sir, no, I want a single stitch. And then he's stitching the pants. And he goes, oh, I love him so much. He's such a nice man. I'm gonna do double stitch. And he does it. And then it stops. And then Paul Newman's like, yep, this is the life. And I was like, I don't know what this is. I don't know what I just watched, but I'm going to watch it. I'm going to finish watching this movie.
Mr. Mosabergo, he's such a nice man. Give him a double stitch anyway.
It was fantastic, but I feel like you're right. Maybe they got to the age they're up there. They're like in their 60s, aren't they? Coen Brothers.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think maybe one of them is like, yeah, you know what? I'm done. I've done exactly what I wanted to do. I've produced the movies and directed the movies and I've written the movies that I wanted to make. And maybe now it's time I enjoy the fruit of my labor, relax and retire. Hopefully, maybe we'll see. But Sean, I look like you were going to say something. If you wanted to say something, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like, talking about that final scene. You were saying the character in the movie kind of comes to that realization that movies are worth it, but I feel like, and I did kind of lose my thought. I had a very specific.
I'm sorry, Sean. I apologize.
But there's also a moment toward the end of the movie where you realize Eddie Mannix is like, he understands the downsides to this, and he's just going to press ahead anyway. Like, he's going to put his faith in it,
Right.
Like, despite the, he just decides to look past the ugliness of it and the unpleasantness of it because of, the good outweighing the bad in his head. And in a way, it's like a leap of faith. That's kind of what it is.
It's funny because that's the word that he couldn't remember.
Oh, that's
very rousing speech, and it has to be for a reason. It's
James. Thank you. That is the scene I was about to reference, which is when Barrett is making his big speech, and we get that big crane like push in, and then we get his close up, and like for a moment you're taken out of everything satirical about the movie, everything that comes off as hints as cynical in that movie, and you're drawn into that speech and you're totally into it, and the music swells and you're ready for him to like bring it home, and then he can't remember the word faith.
Yeah.
And that's, to me, the thing that tells me, well, maybe the Coens aren't completely convinced that movies are worth it, but again, with Mannix, he's going to press ahead anyway. He's just going to put his faith in it anyway.
And let's not forget too that he probably likes his power. He realized, you know what? I like having power over people. I like being able to, have control over people's lives and careers. I'm talking subtextually speaking, not in the surface, but subtextually speaking. I would imagine a guy like Eddie Mannix would enjoy being able to, slap people around, because at Lockheed Martin, he wouldn't be able to do that. In Lockheed Martin, he wouldn't be able to slap people around like he could in Hollywood, like he could in the studio that he works for. That was just my take. That's my perspective on it. I'm not saying that's what the Coen Brothers were going for. I'm just saying that was what I took from it when he decided to stick with the film studios. That I felt that Eddie Mannix was a character who realized, you know what, I actually like power. I enjoy it, and I'm going to exercise it, and I am able to do it. I'm able to be like, a Caesar, essentially a kind of like an emperor. Tell people what to do and when to do it and how to do it.
Yeah, I think that I don't know if I definitely think that that's part of it. I think that there's conflict in him of exercising that power in like a tyrannical way. He feels guilt about it. But there's a real distinction, I think, in the scene where he's interviewing with the Lockheed guy, and the Lockheed guy is bragging about like nuclear capacity. And he brings up that little postcard, which he like tries to hide away really quick when the waiter walks in. It's such a great Coen Brothers moment. And this is like self-important that this guy feels like, oh, it's some real CIA stuff that he's doing. But no, like this guy is like kind of getting off on like, hey, we're building, powerful weapons of mass destruction. You guys are just like make-believe, in a dream factory. And I think that's also part of like why he finds meaning and purpose in doing that, as opposed to being part of like the military industrial complex. He feels like they're creating something more meaningful and lasting, I guess, working at a studio where, again, he's working, 18-hour days. He doesn't see his kid, but he's sacrificing that for something he truly believes in.
Yeah, I could see that.
Yeah, that is the thing that seems to turn him. It gives him pause whenever he shows him that picture. And he's like, the H-Reno. He says we blew the H-Reno or something like that.
Yeah.
That seems to give Mannix some kind of like it kind of disturbs him a little bit.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think.
I mean, can you imagine like you're in the 60s, or was it what year or what period was that? The 50s or 60s? That the
mid 50s.
So 50s. So can you imagine like someone shows you a top secret photo of a freaking destructive bomb? I would imagine that would scare anybody. Like, oh, what the hell is that? Like, what kind of bomb is that? And it's a kind of power that he doesn't understand yet. And I think that's probably the reason why maybe he balked at it. It was like a power that he probably didn't want to understand, maybe, and realize, you know what, I'm going to stick to the power that I do understand, which is running the studio, a film studio anyway.
Yeah.
Just crazy. So, with that said, does anyone have any additional thoughts about the film? Anything that maybe you wanted to talk about or cover but didn't get a chance to within the hour that we've been doing this, talking about this one film that seems to have left a lasting effect on our love for the Coen Brothers filmography?
I'll just say I always appreciate the work of Roger Deakins, their longtime cinematographer, collaborator, virtuoso behind the camera. There's no one alive that is quite as good as him, I think. And they refer to him as, I've seen interviews before where they refer to him almost as like, I can't remember how they phrased it, but like as their closest collaborator in the filmmaking process, and
like
almost as another Coen brother or as another director. Even, they wouldn't go quite so far to say director, but something akin to that. And this movie, it's interesting too, a little nerdy. It's not a deep dive, maybe a shallow dive into the cinematography of the movie, which is Deakins doesn't try to replicate in some kind of really accurate way the type of lighting that they would have had in the studios of that time, or even when he's doing the genre pieces, he doesn't faithfully try to replicate, how the Bible epic is lit and shot, for instance. But they go far enough that it's like Deakins, I think, first and foremost makes it look beautiful and amazing. And he takes his own approach to it. And again, I've encountered an interview with him where he said, like on that scene where he's drinking the wine and they're laughing, where he gets poisoned, or he gets the Mickey. Deakins said he didn't approach that like, oh, I'm going to light this exactly like a studio set in the 50s would be lit, because he said, honestly, I don't know how to do that. That's not the kind of, that's not the kind of cameraman I am. That's not the kind of, light that I use. So, but he said, but we did try to approach it something similar to that, where, you have a lot of fixtures up top or whatever. So all that to say, I think Deakins just puts his own spin on it and makes it look incredible, and you believe that it's from the period, but it's not done in a way that's overly faithful to the point of not being interesting.
Fantastic.
Yeah,
great outlook. James, any last thoughts about the movie that maybe you didn't get to cover?
I just I really want to say that it was interesting when you guys brought this movie up last week, because I had just watched it like 2 days before that, and it'd been a couple of years, and it was because right after watching Mank, the first film that I wanted to watch was Hail Caesar. That was the first movie I thought of where I was like, I want to take the buzz that I just got off of, watching this, incredible film that is so immersed in Hollywood history. And the only other film I could think of that I think captured that era and did it in a way that, like Sean was saying, it's not exactly like, Mank you guys were talking about. It doesn't look exactly like a movie from that era, but it's using a lot of the trademarks and a lot of the style and mixing it with like a lot of modern stuff, like with the digital photography. And on Hail Caesar, it's kind of the same idea. It looks like a Coen Brothers movie, and they borrow a lot of some classic, Hollywood, aesthetic choices, but it still feels like a very modern film. And it's an homage, but it's also its own thing. And what I wanted to say about this movie, Hail Caesar, and then also to link it with Mank and my favorite movie from last year, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, those three movies all together, I think, are like the best modern examples of movies that are really great, like celebrations of Hollywood that also kind of take it to task for some of its, it's bad attributes as well,
Great. Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you, James. I felt that way about Mank too. Mank made me feel similar to how I felt when I saw Hail Caesar. And a lot of that's in the production design, just the Art Deco style of the studios and even like things down to the lettering on the signs, and the cars they're driving and everything. But yeah, and I was going to say earlier too, because Mank came up, Buster Scruggs came up. As much as some filmmakers have lamented Netflix's, destruction of the theatrical experience, you really get. I mean, we wouldn't have gotten a movie like Mank or Buster Scruggs or Roma, if it wasn't for the streaming wars and basically them luring these. Obviously, these auteurs, these great auteurs, and giving them kind of a blank check movie, or not a blank check in that they could spend as much money as they wanted, but a blank check in that they can make the movie they wanted to make. And Mank, 20 years, that screenplay?
Yeah.
Hail Caesar, I think, James, you mentioned, had been a project they had conceptualized for a long time. Of course, that wasn't Netflix, but
I think it says a lot about how difficult it was. I think they were getting to a point where they were having a harder time maybe getting movies made. And I've heard that this is a big problem in Hollywood at the moment is that a lot of, you've got a lot of, great directors that are fleeing to television and, our auteurs are being, Netflix is giving them the opportunity to make the movie of their dreams, like Roma doesn't look like any movie I've ever seen. That movie feels like it was pulled completely from Alfonso Cuarón's, imagination and his memory. And no studio would have given him the resources to do that movie exactly the way he wanted to do it. He would have had to compromise in some way, even as like a 2-time Oscar winning filmmaker, or 1 time at the time.
There's almost like because Netflix doesn't release their statistics about how many people watched and what the equivalent of box office is, if you were to create an equation for that, I think it gives them an opportunity, and really any streaming service, to give them an opportunity to make those kind of movies. Whereas a movie studio releasing them into theaters, the box office numbers are public, and then it's like and because box office becomes such like a game that people play, or like a contest that people play, it was like, well, that movie sucked because it only made $2 million, like Roma. Oh, what a flop. That movie was terrible. It only made $10 million. It's like, well, nobody knows how many people watched it, and therefore it can just be judged on its merits,
Absolutely.
Yeah. Agreed. Yeah. I think, that's what the studios messed up on. They see Netflix has a deep pocket because of the subscribers that they have and they've had for a lot of years. And so they were able to take risks like they do with like Roma and Mank and Buster Scruggs. I just feel that perhaps if the studios were just wise in their picks of what to pump in for a big time box office film as opposed to a smaller film, and allowing these auteur directors to kind of, okay, here's your budget, this is what you got, do what you need to do, and wish you for the best, but we're going to focus all resources to this big blockbuster because this is where the most money is coming into. So hopefully your little small films would pick up the slack if this big box office movie bombs. But that didn't happen with the studios. But now what you have with Netflix is that they don't have that risk, because they're going to have the subscriber base there the whole time, and they're just looking for new material.
Yeah.
And so that's going to probably be the future coming up when it comes to these subscriber, like you said, the streamer wars that are about to we're about to embark on.
And they're gunning for prestige too. Like Netflix.
Yeah.
Netflix is still want, and Amazon, they want Oscar nominated movies because they want the attention.
Right.
And that's worth capital to them. So it's all still financially motivated. But it's ID Crisis says, "Gotta bail, guys. Good stream. Have a good weekend."
See you, ID Crisis.
Thanks for tuning in, man. But yeah, they want the prestige, so they're willing to invest in it because they're the new people.
Sorry, James.
I was going to say, in addition to, when Netflix kind of came out on the scene, and the controversy was about whether, it was fair for them to exhibit films, on their service and in theaters at the same time. And if they were going to be taken seriously in Hollywood as actual movies. On top of all of that, they were doing like these big elaborate like premieres, and really
were
kind of like going back, harkening back to old Hollywood. Which was something that, like, back in Hail Caesar time, like, Hollywood premieres used to be like these extravaganzas. They were huge. Yeah. There just isn't really the money for that. They'd rather, spend it on marketing around the world, and maybe not putting as much into those premieres. And like, Netflix spent a lot of money on trying to market The Irishman, even though it dropped on their service, and you can just, they didn't really need to, but they wanted to acknowledge that they felt that this was a real important work from a big director,
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we're hopefully the other streaming services catch on, because Netflix are ahead of the game. They were able to lure a lot of talented directors. David Finch is one. They were able to not convince, but they're able to lure Martin Scorsese, and now they have the Coen Brothers. So what's next? Hopefully we'll see. Maybe Spielberg will come along, or maybe George Lucas. Maybe, I don't know, but I feel like perhaps that the future is is streaming for sure, and I hope that there comes a time where these streaming services still kind of premiere their films in the theater for a while before they, maybe, I don't know, like a month. I would say a month. Like, hey, we're going to premiere this in the theaters for a month, and after a month, it's going to go to our streaming services. So that way, people can have, if they don't have our streaming services, they can still watch it in the theater. That'd be a good. I think that'd be a good model, a fair model for the if they want to preserve that old Hollywood type of getting box office numbers and what have you, a little extra income. But that's just me. But my final thoughts on the film, as a writer, I feel that if anyone who watches this stream later, after the fact, Coen Brothers are the two brothers that you should study for sure if you are serious about writing for film or just writing in general, because I feel that they are grandmasters of storytelling. And so if you guys have not heard of the Coen Brothers, and maybe you have heard of them, or maybe you've heard of some of their films, I would recommend, and pretty sure Sean and James will agree with me as well, to study their films. Watch their films, because you will only benefit from observing and experiencing their films because of the way the skill they have to showcase their storytelling abilities, to show you guys not just like we mentioned, like Sean mentioned earlier, the bright side of a story, but also the underbelly, which is a very hard thing to do, and especially in this day and age. It's a talent that doesn't exist amongst many filmmakers. You're either one or the other, right? You're either a lighthearted, storyteller, or you're a very dark storyteller. It's very hard to balance both, and I think Coen Brothers are masters of balancing the both aspects of the dark and the light aspects of a story. So for me, I look at that's what lures me into a Coen Brothers film is they're able to do that. And so for all the aspiring writers out there or screenwriters, get a hold of some of Coen Brothers movies. Doesn't matter which one. Try to get all of them if you can, and watch them all, and you will only benefit. So that's all I have to say about the Coen Brothers in general, not just Hail Caesar, but the Coen Brothers. So there's that with that.
Thanks, Julio, and thank you, James, for for joining us this time. It was fun to have you.
Yeah, man, it was great. It was great to have a third person.
Yes, it's very enjoyable, guys. Love the Coen Brothers. Love
the Coen Brothers. We'll have to do another movie, break down another movie in the near future. Sean, do you have any ideas for the next show? We won't be on next week because obviously next week is Christmas. We're still on the fence about the New Year's show. It'd be kind of cool to do a New Year's show like on midnight, but I know a lot of people may have plans. But Sean, or James, if you are interested in doing a midnight show, that'd be a cool idea. Just to do a midnight show maybe and bring in the new year or not. It doesn't matter. But we won't be on next week. We might be on New Year's, but if not, it's not a big deal. We'll come back the week after. And Sean, do you have any ideas for the next show, or do you want to wait until we get there?
I'll put my thinking cap on.
I for some reason I want to do Star Wars. I don't know why. Star Wars keeps popping up in my head, and I want to talk about not the new stuff, the old stuff. At New Hope, Empire Strikes Back, and Return of the Jedi. I want to talk about those films because I feel those films were obviously that was the staple, guys. That was the trilogy, the original trilogy that started it all. With the. Go ahead.
If there's any movie I can talk about, it's the Star Wars movies.
Yeah, let's do it. So you want to do Star Wars the next show?
Sure. Yeah, sounds good.
James, would you like to join us on that show?
Yeah, I've seen the films a couple of times. I know a little bit about Star Wars. I would love to share one of my all-time favorite movies.
I mean, I've probably spent 1,000 hours, let's be honest, 10,000 hours talking about Star Wars.
Only?
In my regular life.
Wait, the trilogy or just the New Hope?
Everything. And actually, I've probably spent more of my life talking about the prequels than any other topic, literally any other topic that exists. Yeah. Because the prequels were so divisive and controversial. And actually, Julio, that we got to get you to watch episode 3.
That's right. I have not seen episode 3 yet.
You were going to do that. So
right. Okay.
Maybe that could be our next show.
Okay, how about this? How about we make January the Star Wars show? How about we do the prequels? Then we'll do the George Lucas trilogy, and then we'll do the new trilogy. How about that?
Works for me.
I would love that.
Okay, let's do that. So January, let's see. Let me look at my calendar here. So you know what? Let's just skip January 1st. Let's just do that. So January 8th, January 15th, and January the 22nd, it's going to be nothing but Star Wars, guys. So the first January 8th, that will be about the prequels. So we'll be talking about the prequels. It'll be the first time I'll be watching episode 3 because, to be very honest with you, and in my humble opinion, the prequels suck donkey balls. And I hate the prequels. I can't stand them. They were terrible. Actually, after episode 2, I almost puked my guts out outside the theater because that's how terrible it was. So I'm hoping episode 3 is good. It's good enough because I did not watch it at all. And so we'll talk about the prequels on the 8th. On the 15th, we'll talk about the classics, Star Wars, New Hope, Empire, and Return of the Jedi. And then on the 22nd, we'll talk about the new ones, which was The Force Awakens, The Last Jedi, and what was the last one? The Rise of Skywalker. And those should be interesting shows. Rise of Skywalker, right?
Yeah. Have you seen it?
Yes. I also thought that was trash.
Okay.
But oddly enough, I did like Last Jedi, which is weird, isn't it? Isn't that weird? But anyway,
I think that's right. But hey.
Yeah, we'll talk
would,
about it in more details during that time. What was that, Sean? Sorry.
No, I feel very similarly. Though I wouldn't say trash, but but yeah, I feel like The Last Jedi for me was about something. It had something to say.
Right.
And I felt like the other two movies in the sequel trilogy didn't have anything to say other than Star Wars is cool. That was what they were trying to say.
Right.
Which we all agree. It is cool. But yeah, that sounds good.
Okay, so we'll go into deep analysis. We'll talk about not just the story and the production, but also the behind the scenes stuff. I think that would be very interesting to put out into the forefront and talk about what caused George Lucas to bomb the prequels, and then of course the second trilogy. Well, not the second trilogy, but the classic trilogy. We could talk about that, and then we'll talk about the new trilogy that's owned by Disney. So without the input of George Lucas, and we could discuss that. So there you have it, guys. So the rest of December, there will be no talking cinema until January 8th, where we'll talk about the prequels, and hopefully you guys can join us then. And if time allows, we might open the show up. We didn't open the show up this week because there's no need to, in my opinion. I felt that we're just going to talk about the gloriousness that was Hail Caesar. And so I felt that maybe having people on wouldn't have been a good idea, because I have a feeling that not many people watch Hail Caesar. But I know people watch Star Wars, so I'm sure you'll have your opinion on what you felt on the prequels, the classics, and the Disney trilogy. So hopefully you guys will join us then, and enjoy me bashing the prequels more than likely, and also the rest of the J.J. Abrams Star Wars. But for some reason, Rian Johnson's Last Jedi was all right for me. It was entertaining, and I was looking forward to his third film. But for whatever reason, the Disney executives did not bring it back on to do the third film, which was, I think, a huge mistake. But we could talk about that in more detail at that time. So hopefully you guys will join us. Sean, any last departing words before we end this?
May the force be with you.
James, any last words before we end this?
Have a happy holidays, guys, and we'll talk Star Wars in January. Sounds like a great way to 2021.
Absolutely. All right, guys. You guys have a safe weekend, and we'll see you in January. Take care.